With this new skeletal Reaver setup, I'm doing over 400,000 DPS to bosses. This is over double the DPS of the old build, the old Arsonist build. And what's great is that this build can do that damage against any boss because we have so much armor break. And in an upcoming patch, the devs just announced that Skeletal Arsonist is getting nerfed by having their spirit cost increased by 25%. So not only are the skeletal Reavers doing more damage than the Arsonist already, that is going to get amplified in an upcoming patch. On top of this, the skeletal Reavers are also way tankier, having about 30% more maximum HP. They're also fantastic for AoE clearing, which I didn't expect because they're so fast and they attack so fast. They're going to run at targets, leap on them, kill them super quick, and then you can detonate dead them. And this build ends up being as fast, if not slightly faster, it's very hard to tell, than Skeletal Arsonist. It's at worst comparable and at best slightly better in AoE farming. For single target, you can see it is much better. And what's great is as you get deep into in-game content, I'm currently doing this like crazy Atlas strategy that I'm actually going to talk about in this video, where I've gotten up to 7 tier 15 map drops off of a single boss. But what happens in these super juiced maps is the mobs are ridiculously strong. And you've probably experienced this yourself playing Arsonist, where your Arsonist will randomly start to death ball and you're going to run out of dudes. But with this army composition, with just pure Reaver with a couple of priests, I never run out of guys. I've also made some changes to defensive kit, so the build is also much tankier than it used to be because I'm dropping some of my extra armor for more energy shield. Armor is great, but I probably had too much armor in my old build, and I didn't have enough mitigation for things that weren't affected by armor. So the new setup has more ES in favor of less armor. We're also going to be buffering our pain offering quite a bit more than we used to, which is also going to be contributing to the increased damage. On the whole, this new setup is far tankier, it does way more damage, and it's just better and easier to play than the old version. So let's start by talking about the skill gems, because that's probably the most changed part of the build. And I want to start with the Reavers, obviously, because they're the cornerstone of the build. They're what is doing all of our damage. And the reason why they do so much damage is in large part because of their ability to synergize with Rage. So typically, Rage is going to be a stacking buff that's going to increase the damage that people do, and it's a multiplicative damage increase because it's increasing your weapon damage. But specifically with Reavers, they're also getting attack speed based on their Rage. This means that as they get more and more rage, they're not only going to be hitting harder, they're going to be attacking faster, which is going to cause the rage to ramp even quicker. This gives them incredible synergies with attack speed and incredible multipliers on their damage output. Now, this also makes gem quality very important for them because we're going to get 20% increased effect on rage from gem quality. So in terms of our support gems, we're going to be running Feeding Frenzy. So this is going to be optional. So you really have two options for this first gem, and this is the only one that's optional. All the other ones are fixed. But Feeding Frenzy is going to make them do a lot more damage, but they're going to take a lot more damage as well. Now, if you're not a fan of Feeding Frenzy, you can instead put either Minion Mastery on for a little bit of survivability and a little bit of damage, or you can also put on Last Gasp, which is going to make it so that after your Reapers die, they're going to live for 4 extra seconds. And because those last 4 seconds where they live are going to be where they're fully ramped with all their rage and all the attack speed and everything, those last 4 seconds are actually pretty high value. It's also going to start your minion recharge timer as soon as Last Gasp is procced, which means that you're going to be getting your minions back even quicker. So, like I said, if you run Feeding Frenzy if you want, or you can run Last Gasp or minion skills, but everything else, Heavy Swing for increased damage, Brutality for increased damage. Now, the downside of Brutality is going to disable our chaos damage on them, but this is alright because Brutality is so much damage, it's okay to do this. Heft is going to be another damage multiplier, and then Martial Tempo is going to give them more attack speed so that they ramp even faster. So, all of that is great, but check out Pain Offering. So, Pain Offering is really what kind of takes this build to the next level. So Pain Offering is going to give them 30% more attack speed and 50% more damage. So this is a 50% damage multiplier, and then the attack speed is additive with all your other attack speed sources. So they're going to end up attacking very quickly, meaning they're going to ramp even faster. And then, this base value is pretty high already, but if you go into the passive tree, we're also able to take Bolstering Presence and then Aura Effect for a total of 36% increased effect on Pain Offering. That's massively increases because it's 36% of the more damage and the attack speed, which is they're multiplying together for crazy power. We're also able to run Font of Rage, which is going to have an area of effect around it, which is actually quite small. But when your minions are in it, they're going to be generating 2 rage every second. Persistence is going to increase the duration, and then Ablation is going to make it so that it's even 30% stronger. So we're increasing the effect by 30% more, but with the downside of spending 15% life every time we cast it. This is optional. You can drop this if you want to because of the 15% life cost, and there's certain maps where I actually take this out. Like if I get a map where like you get reduced flasks, or if I get a map with reduced regen on life, I'll actually take out Ablation, but in general it's just really freaking strong. Finally, we're going to be running Dance Macabre, which is going to make it so whenever we activate it, it's going to eat 2 minions instead of 1, but it's going to increase the buff by another 30%. And you can see why this is so strong. We're buffing this by 30, 60, and then 36, so a total of 96%. So this 50% damage ends up becoming almost 100% damage, and the 30% attack speed becomes almost 60% attack speed. Wildly powerful, right? And obviously this just has fantastic synergies with the Reavers. And we're also playing Clerics, which is really good with Pain Offering, because when you activate the Pain Offering, you're going to kill 2 minions. But the second your Pain Offering ends, your Clerics are going to res the 2 minions, and they're going to be right back in the fight. So you're not going to have like weird downtimes and stuff with your minions, because, you know, in this setup, I'm playing with 2 Clerics, and we're also going to be playing with Ingenuity, so that their cooldown recovery rate is increased by 30%, which is going to affect the Cleric's res. So whenever your minions die, they're going to be resing 30% more often. This is also part of what makes this army so much tankier, is because, you know, you're playing with 2 priests and they're resing, so not only are your guys like tankier and they have more health and armor, but also whenever they die, the priests tend to live because the Reavers are frontlining, so they're going to get res, and the healing is incredible. I'm also playing Minion Mastery on my Clerics in order to give them increased healing and life, and then I'm playing Arcane Tempo to give them more cast speed so they can ramp their heals out faster. Now, the next 2 pieces we're going to talk about are vital to the offensive kit of the build, but they're going to serve 2 different purposes. So the first one is going to be the Skeletal Sniper that we are running one of. This guy's entire job is to break armor using corrosion. Armor seems to be the main form of mitigation that bosses have against physical damage, and there's bosses that have a lot of armor. It doesn't seem like bosses tend to have % physical damage reduction. If they do, I haven't noticed it yet, but what I do notice is some bosses have a lot of armor. And what makes the Skeletal Sniper so strong is that the armor break stacks all the way until they're at 0 armor. If you compare this to something like the Curse that reduces armor, that's capped at around 5,000, but Corrosion can go, you know, 30, 40, 50,000 if a boss has that much armor. And so we're going to be playing Deadly Poison, which is going to increase the damage by 75% of the poison, and poison damage is actually what breaks the armor, so we need that. And then we're playing with Demolisher to break 40% more armor. And you can see it in the boss clips, these guys absolutely melt armor. But there's a huge downside, which is that your Hellhound is going to constantly be igniting enemies, and that ignite is going to explode your gas clouds and prevent you from stacking armor break. So what we end up doing is we're actually putting on Elemental Focus onto the Hellhound to disable the ignite. The Elemental Focus is going to stop the ignite from spreading, which is going to make it so your gas clouds don't get exploded. This is going to be a good change for bossing, but this does make your AoE marginally worse, but it's really not that big of a deal. Our dog is also able to run Maim so that we reduce enemies' evasion whenever he hits enemies. So, you know, in case you're fighting an evasion mob, it makes your dudes easier to hit them. Then we're running Meat Shield for increased survivability. We're running Culling Strike for that low HP execute. And this absolutely works against bosses. It's really freaking strong. And then we're running Elemental Army just to make sure he is resistance capped. My current setup, my minions are about like 75%. My resistance cap is 80. It's hard to find the last gem for him, so I'm just giving him 30% all res. Now, the last offensive skill we're going to talk about, and then we're going to talk about the best defensive skill in the entire game, but the last offensive skill we're going to talk about is Detonate Dead. This ability is absolutely incredible because it's going to do % max health damage, which is huge in these high-level maps, and it just does ridiculous damage. And what's going to happen is your Reavers are just going to run with insane movement speed to enemies. They're going to attack ridiculously fast, and they're going to rip enemies to absolute shreds very quickly. And you're just going to cast Detonate Dead on their targets. And because Detonate Dead actually has a long cast time, you can start casting your Detonate Dead before the target's even dead, and the second their HP hits 0, your Detonate Dead will go on them, which is pretty weird, but it makes the build very fluent. They're playing Magnified Effect for increased area, Spell Echo for increased area of effect, and Considered Casting for more damage. Now, I would say Detonate Dead is a very core piece of the build, and it is really strong. So definitely make sure you're using this in AoE. It's obviously not going to do anything against bosses, but in AoE it is exceptionally powerful. And this brings us to the incredible defensive power of this build. So as we talked about last video, Grim Feast is absolutely insane when mapping because it's going to cause enemies to drop remnants that you can pick up to give you 600 energy shield back, and this can overcap your energy shield by up to double. So you can see in town right now I'm sitting at 6,300, but you're going to see in the clips while I'm running around mapping, I'm consistently sitting at over 12,000 energy shield, and it's very easy to keep it up when mapping. This is a disgusting buff, and it's part of the reason why I had decided to shift a little bit of the focus away from armor and more towards energy shield. So we're still aiming for the same sort of heat proofing setup I talked about in the previous video. I don't currently have it on my new amulet, but we're still running the same thing where we're running heat proofing to make our armor apply to fire damage. And then this is ridiculously strong when paired with Altered Flash because we're converting cold damage and lightning damage to fire, and that's going to make the heat proofing apply to that. It's just a disgusting combo that makes you ridiculously resilient against elemental damage. On top of that, armor is also very powerful because we're converting 20% of physical damage into chaos, which makes our armor much more effective, and we're taking 20% of all damage that we take and giving it to the Hellhound instead. This means that our armor is only applying to 60% of the damage that we take rather than the full 100%, which means that even with a small amount of armor, it's going to be mitigating a huge amount of incoming damage. And it's really that emphasis on small amount of armor that led me to make some of these changes. So the core of the changes are just changing item bases. That's all I really did. I didn't really change any passive tree nodes. I didn't really change anything else. But I swapped my gloves, my helmet, and my boots to pure energy shield. This is because despite doing that, I'm still sitting at 3128 armor, and I'm getting 20% more armor applied to hits as long as I'm high on energy shield thanks to reinforced barrier. So really I am sitting at, because I'm always at 12,000 ES, right? So in reality, instead of 3,100 armor, I'm sitting at closer to like 3,800 armor. And that is plenty of armor to mitigate, through heat proofing and to mitigate physical damage hits because they're getting mitigated by 40%. That is plenty of armor. And I'm able to now get up to 6,300 energy shield. And when we combine with Grim Feast, it is completely broken. So I'm still running an armor ES base on my chest, especially because the Shaman Mantle is also going to give us Spirit, which is super powerful because it gives us an extra minion. And then I'm still running armor on my belt, and then I'm running a armor ES shield. And you can see that I'm still getting plenty of armor, and I also have tons of energy shield. Now, with regards to our gear, we're still going to be running a lot of the same stats. So we're going to be trying to cap out resistances as much as you can, and your stat priority on pretty much on like your helmet, chest, gloves, and boots is all going to be about getting, int or strength, getting max life, getting energy shield, getting armor, and then getting your resistances. So the number one priority on all 4 of these pieces of gear is going to be resistances. And once you're resistance capped and you're good to go on that regard, you're going to be looking for ranks of minion skills on your helmet. You're going to be looking for flat spirit on your chest piece, and on your boots, you're going to be looking for movement speed. Now, to really scale your damage, you need a good scepter. And I did actually learn a couple of things about the scepter since my last video. So the most important stats are still percent spirit, still ranks of minion skills, but the third most important stat is actually going to be allies in your presence deal bonus damage. This actually ends up being slightly more damage than either of the crit rolls, and it ends up being quite a bit more damage than the additive damage that you can roll. So look for the allies in your presence deal additional damage as your third roll, and then for your fourth and fifth roll, you're still looking for crit hit and crit damage. If you can find a scepter that's that good, please hit me up. Okay, I've been trying to buy one for multiple days, so if you get, shoot me a DM if you find a scepter that good. But for your sixth stat, you can look for anything from, like, I believe you can still roll minion maximum life, you can still roll additive damage, you can roll accuracy if you have a lot more options after that. But it's very important as well that the base scepter is malice for the stacking crit buff. We're still stacking crit like crazy, as you're going to see when we get into the passive tree. Malice is going to be by far your best damage option for a base as your scepter. Now, on your necklace, This is going to be your second most important piece when you're talking about scaling your damage, and you're going to be looking for number 1 ranks of minion skills and number 2 plus spirit. In my opinion, the Solar Amulet is going to be the best base for this because it's going to give us flat spirit as an implicit on the amulet. So this is really strong. You can see mine has % ES, which is great, and it has max mana. I wish the maximum mana was max life, but you know, it can't be perfect, right? But it's pretty damn good. One other thing that I've learned since my last video is the power of the soul cores that you can put into your armor. So in this case, I got a shield with crazy amounts of flat resistances, but remember, because we're converting so much damage to fire, it's really important to get maximum fire resistance. And at first I was kind of disappointed, but then I realized because I had so much resistances, I could just run soul core of Purate, which will allow me to add maximum fire res to my armor. So I'm setting at 80% maximum fire res right now. So this is another way that you can kind of optimize your build, which is that, you know, if you end up getting tons of resistances on your gear like I have, you can put the maximum resistance on your gem slots instead. But if you don't have enough resistance, obviously my gear is freaking insane. So if you don't have enough resistances, just drop the maximum resistance gems that I'm playing and just run flat reses instead. That is totally fine. Now, on the passive tree, first of all, you know, no gameplay footage, okay? I learn, I get better, I improve my builds, I make my videos better, okay? I appreciate the feedback though, guys. Please keep it up. But our passive tree is going to look very similar. So the only difference is I took 2 points out of armor and energy shield, like out of, sorry, armor and ES here, and out of Ancient Aegis, and then you're also not going to be taking this node because I assume you're not level 91. If you are, then go for it. But Ancient Aegis is currently bugged, so you are getting the armor from your body armor, but the energy shield component of this node is not working. So we're going to be dropping those 3 points, and we're instead going to be moving them down here into aura effect. As I discussed earlier, this is going to buff your pain offering, which is going to be a huge damage multiplier. So you can see the tree still pretty much looks the same. We're getting all this damage. We're getting, you know, the crit damage, crit. One thing to note is that this extra chaos damage isn't going to work because we're running brutality, but that's fine. We still need the chaos resistance for our minions. We're getting more crit, you know, all that good stuff, right? All this ES, maximum elemental resistance. You guys know the deal, right? The tree's linked down below if you want to check it out. But yeah, that's pretty much why I made the changes I made, and that's partly why the build got a little bit better. So I told you guys at the beginning of the video I was going to show you the Atlas strat that I'm using that allows me to get, you know, 7 tier 15s off of a single boss. Now keep in mind that's the exception, not the norm, but you're going to be getting an average of like 3 to 6 tier 15s per map using this strategy, but you need a very powerful build to play it. Luckily this build is really strong. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be Val Orbing your keys. So when you Val Orb the keys, it's either going to add more affixes to the key. So I'll show you real quick what it looks like. So for this strategy, you're going to be Val Orbing your keys. So you can see here, I have a key with 100% Waystone drop and 4 modifiers. And when I Val Orb it, actually nothing happened this time, but you have a chance to increase number of Waystones, you can increase number of modifiers, or you can increase, oh, wait, actually, I lost a tier level. So now this is a tier 14 instead of a tier 15, but on average, this ends up making it better, especially when you pair it with Corrupted Infusion. So part of the reason why I had to make this build so much stronger is because I'm running double corrupted maps using Corrupted Infusion, which is going to massively make these maps way harder, but it's going to significantly increase the loot. We're also playing Unstable Energies, which is going to buff our suffixes or affixes, and on our Waystones, remember, our Waystones can get up to 12 modifiers, so this is pretty insane. Running Grueling Journey, which is going to buff all of our modifiers for each other modifier, and again, you have 12 modifiers, so you're getting a 24% buff, and yeah, this is linked below as well, and this is how I'm getting so many Waystones per map, and you need a powerful build to run this, and luckily you can do it with this build. So, you know, even if you're like not doing tier 15s yet, you can rush to Corrupted Infusion and use this build and use this strategy to farm insane amounts of maps with insane amounts of loot. So that's pretty much going to do it for this video, guys. I love this new version of the build. You know, I'm sorry that Arsonist got nerfed, but this new version is stronger than old Arsonist, and it's not getting nerfed. So this is going to be the meta minion build moving forward, at least for now. But like I said in my last video, okay? It could be 1 week before we find a better minion build. So, you know, keep that in mind. But I appreciate you guys watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.